I'm joined now by the Times columnist Melanie Phillips. Hello, Melanie.
Morning.
How are you?
Pretty good, thank you.
How's your soothsaying working out today? Is it as good as Zoltar's?
Well, I predicted that I'd be seeing you this morning.
Well, that's pretty good. That works. Look, as we said earlier, you can expect that the £5 billion black hole in the defence plans is going to come up at PMQs today. This leaves Andy Burnham and whoever he appoints as Chancellor, and we'll find out, to find the money either through higher taxes, through spending cuts, or through more borrowing. And on top of that, they still need to work out how to raise defence spending to 3.5% of GDP by 2035. Melanie, the Defence Minister, Luke Pollard, spoke to Kate McCann and Stig Abel on Times Radio Breakfast.
Of the £15 billion extra spending power that we now have, with the Treasury set out how 10 billion or so of that will be spent by asking other departments to cut their capital funding by 1p in the pound and transfer that money to defence. £4.7 billion will be set out at the autumn budget, and that's not unusual for governments to do. The last government did so when they made changes to the bus cap in 2022 and the Shared Prosperity Fund, making the announcement and then setting out how that will be paid for at the following budget.
So that was Luke Pollard speaking to Times Radio Breakfast, and you can join them every day from 6 a.m. So, Melanie, after months of delay to the publication of this defence investment plan, to the extent that it almost became a bit of a joke, here it is, and it's still not fully funded. Do we just not have enough money to do what we need to do?
It's still a bit of a joke, isn't it? I mean, they just don't want to spend the money on defence. They are prioritising welfare, as has been said over and over again. But even the amount that they have set out, paltry as it is, and even given the 5 billion black hole, the 10 billion doesn't look to me to be terribly clever either. It's all smoke and mirrors. I mean, you know, as ever, increases in public spending include decreases in public spending, in that it involves the British Army having to make cuts. So it's rearranging the furniture, it's smoke and mirrors, it's high-level financial chicanery and trickery, and at the end of the day, it's still got a shortfall, and it's still got a black hole, and even without the shortfall and the black hole and the chicanery, there's very little chance that it's going to reach even the 3% deadline or level that the government has set itself by the end of the Parliament, and of course 3.5% by 2035. I
mean, I'm interested in where you think this leaves us as relates to NATO, because I mean, look, we're struggling to hit the 3% or the 3.5%, but 2.5% of our economy is, of course, a lot more than 2.5% of, for example, Poland's economy. We do have a relatively well-equipped Air Force, Navy, perhaps not that many soldiers. Do you feel like we're pulling our weight?
Absolutely not. I mean, if you look at the various calibrations that NATO itself puts out, it's pathetic. Britain is currently 31st out of 32 countries in terms of rearmament. The only country below us is Iceland, which doesn't have an armed forces.
But I mean, that's coming from where we're coming from. If,
yeah.
Like in raw pounds and pence, I'm sure we're still one of the highest spenders in NATO.
Well, it's a question of the proportion that we spend. I mean, it's it's all very well saying pounds and pence. Yes, it's a lot of money, but the raw reality is that we have a non-functioning armed forces. I mean, in the words of one general, the British Army would only be able to seize a small market town on a good day. It's possibly going to rise to a medium-sized market town on a good day, but that doesn't fill me with a great deal of enthusiasm. I mean, we're facing, the West is facing amazing challenges and problems and threats. Russia, China, leave aside the Middle East. And we're not equipped for any of it.
Well, at least it's a market town during the day. I've been to some market towns at night, and you wouldn't want to risk it. Look, Keir Starmer spent months attacking the Conservatives over what he calls a £14 billion black hole in their public finances. He's now vulnerable to the same criticism, isn't he?
Yes, totally. I mean, look, it's not Keir Starmer, it's not the Conservatives, it's governments over decades who, in my view, have systematically lied to the public by saying we can give you everything, and they're pretending that they can give the public what they want, which is higher levels of spending in public services, health service, education, the sacred cows, and the money has been found by denuding other areas. Now, this is not the way a properly functioning business can work without finally the ordure hitting the fan and going bankrupt, and that's broadly where the country's got to.
Well, look, let's get an insider view. Let's bring in now James Nation, who's a former Treasury advisor to Rishi Sunak. He's now the managing director at Forefront. James, good morning.
Good morning, Hugo.
So look, that £5 billion, £5 billion sounds like a big number, but in the context of government spending with a budget of trillions, how difficult is that gap to close, really?
Look, it shouldn't be insurmountable, but I think we've just got to put it in context. You know, the 4.7 billion was actually larger than the 4 billion total that they expect to get from trimming departmental capital budgets by 1%. So, you know, what Keir Starmer referred to yesterday in terms of the capital cuts that will fund this plan, you've got a larger element that is unspecified cuts to be found at the budget in later this year. And then also, when you actually look at the small print of the funding plan, beyond a few roads that have caused a bit of a political stir, no actual specific capital programs that are going to be cut have been identified. You know, all of that is details to be confirmed later this year. So the 4.7 billion has clearly caught the headlines this morning, Hugo, but I think when you look at the detail behind this plan some more, there's a lot that has still been pushed to the right that is going to need to be solved and set out later this year.
And how unusual is this? I mean, is it a fairly normal thing for governments to, or at least prime ministers, to sort of write checks that their successors have to cash?
Look, I think there is an element where, of course, we have seen this from previous governments in terms of chopping and changing to capital budgets in particular. Everyone says they're not going to do that, but then when confronted with a difficult challenge that leads you to think, should we contemplate putting taxes up, or should we contemplate difficult decisions on the departmental day-to-day spending side? That's why in the past there have always been sometimes these capital wheezes and tricks. So I don't want to kind of, overclaim that this hasn't happened before. But what was novel to me is it's usual for me, Hugo, that, the deliverability of the government saving plan can be questioned. So when we set out a defence funding uplift under Rishi Sunak, there was a commitment in there, for instance, to cut civil service headcount. And rightly, we were challenged on the deliverability of that. But I do think, in fairness, it is new to me to actually see a funding line that says, to be funded at budget 2026 and for the Treasury to have signed that off.
So, I mean, Luke Pollard he said to Times Radio that it wasn't unusual for governments to announce spending before every penny's been accounted for. But you're saying this goes a bit further than the norm.
It does go a bit further than the norm in terms of quantum. It is usual and we saw an example of this earlier this summer when Rachel Reeves announced a delay in the fuel duty rise that was penciled in. And she did announce some changes to the energy profits levy, but there's an element of that package on the cost of living that is unfunded. It is true to say that I think Luke Pollard mentioned the bus fare cap. We did extend that and then have to come back to it at a fiscal event. But that, we're talking there hundreds of millions in terms of magnitude. This is quite sizable, not just in terms of the 4.7 billion, but also, as I say, these unspecified efficiencies and capital cuts that departments are going to need to find and set out. So for me, it's kind of the size and the quantum of this and the fact that it is meant to, underpin a plan that we've been waiting for 2 years on the defence side that really makes this one stick out.
Don't we all know, though, James, what happens to unfunded commitments is that they just lead to more borrowing? I mean, that's what will happen here as well, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there will be, it's quite clear to me that, Team Burnham coming in, it's going to be more taxes, more spending, more borrowing. The challenge for them is, can they find some wheezes to do the more borrowing on the capital side within the current fiscal rules? And that is the debate that I think is going on at the moment. If you look at what Jim O'Neill and Andy Haldane are saying, I think the reason why Team Burnham are angry about this, I think, Hugo, is I think their plan yesterday would have been, let's bank what Starmer's done here. Let's take what the military and others are saying, which is, while they are privately unhappy, this is being described as a quote-unquote first step, and let's deal with this in terms of a further uplift for defence when we do a spending review, as in set all government departmental budgets next year. But I think clearly what's happened with the 4.7 and the further question marks underpinning this plan is it's going to be a headache for the autumn. And it's going to be a headache for the autumn when we know it's going to be a difficult budget. And when we know as well from Andy Burnham's speech this week, there are a lot of commitments that he's going to want to try and find room to fund. I mean, look at the comments on council housing. Look at the comments on what Number 10 North is supposed to drive. So this is going to be a further unhelpful pressure for him, no doubt.
Finally, James, well, I've got you. And on a different note, Andy Burnham, he's told a meeting of the Women's Parliamentary Labour Party he wants to end the culture of briefing against women in politics. Of course, briefing against all sorts of people has been a part of Westminster politics for decades. Why is it so ingrained? Is it a vital part of the process? Or can any leader just decide to stamp it out?
I think when, a leader has authority, you can set a culture and a tone to try and stamp it out. But the unfortunate thing, Hugo, and you'll know this, is, to me, it's the sad nature of Westminster, and it's the sad nature as well of when power gets quite fragile and, you have various political actors involved who feel like, authority is ebbing away, want to get their point across when things become contested, arguments get heated, and want to kind of keep their relationships with journalists sweet. And so I think for that reason, I'm always skeptical that you're really going to be able to keep a lid on this. But I think kind of message discipline and authority from the centre, a tone set by Andy Burnham early is important. A culture in number 10 is going to be really important. But, the time to judge this, Hugo, will not be when Andy Burnham is all conquering and all strong. It will be when times get tough.
Yeah, I think that's very wise, and heaven forfend they should stop speaking to journalists. Thank you very much indeed, James Nation, former Treasury advisor to Rishi Sunak and now the MD at Forefront. Melanie Phillips is sticking with me. In a moment we're going to be talking about how education is failing the white working class children. This is Hugo Rifkind here, until joined by Melanie Phillips. And look, a bit of breaking news for you. The family of the 3-year-old boy who was injured in a crocodile pit have thanked zoo staff who rescued him and are caring for him in hospital. In a statement which did not name the family, which was released through Cambridgeshire Police, they said, "We are truly grateful for the public support and well wishes we have received, as well as to everyone who's been directly involved in our son's care and recovery in hospital. Our attention remains focused on his recovery and supporting him through this extremely challenging and prolonged period of time." A fundraising page has been set up to support the boy's recovery and rehabilitation and to give his family financial stability while they support him in hospital, the force said. Remarkable story, remarkable troubling story that was. As I said, Melanie Phillips is still with me. Melanie, a new independent inquiry co-chaired by the former Labour Education Secretary Estelle Morris says that England's education system is failing white working class children who remain the lowest performing demographic. You've just written a column about this. Explain to us what's going on.
Well, the report rightly draws attention to an extremely troubling situation that poor white working class children do so badly in school that the majority of them leave school unable to properly function in either further education or indeed the world of employment. So why is this? So the report comes up with a whole raft of explanations, many of which are extremely good and extremely valuable, and recommendations similarly that are good and valuable. But in my view, what is at the root of all this is a lack of aspiration. I mean, the government's reaction to this was absolutely typical for a Labour government. It's all about class, said Bridget Phillipson. Well, no, it's not all about class, because the crucial point here is that it's white poor working class children, children on free school meals, who are so disadvantaged, whereas non-white poor working class children do much better. So the question is, what is it about whiteness? Now, there are many reasons for this, I think. But it's a difference in a culture of aspiration. Most, if not all, ethnic minorities, however poor they are, they have a culture of aspiration in which they regard education as the weapon in their child's armoury to make a good life for him or herself. And they push those children and they expect excellence from them. Now, that's not so true of the white working class, the disadvantaged white working class. They love their children. They have ambitions for their children, but as the report says, they define success differently. They don't regard, like everybody, they regard personal happiness as the key element of success, a successful life. Well, that's, in my view, also slightly questionable, but anyway, that's what everyone thinks. But the poor white working class does not think that good exam grades have anything to do with that. So why is that? Well, the report says, quite rightly, very disturbingly, that children are turned off virtually as soon as they arrive at school, in a nursery class. They arrive at school unable to function as well as others. They can't read, they can't speak properly, they can't read, they are unable to learn reading. They are not socialised into the world of education. Consequently, they fall further and further behind all the time. And this accelerates until they get to the point where they are positively disengaged from the school process. So you have to ask what's going on there. And a number of things are going on there. But one of the things that I identify is that for decades, the white working class, or the white population and the white school children have been taught an overriding lesson that white society really sucks, that whiteness is something really bad. And white boys have it even worse. They're told that being male and masculine is really bad, really toxic. And so white boys fall even further behind. But there is something pernicious about whiteness. They're taught about slavery. They're taught that slavery involved white people enslaving brown and black-skinned people.
Why would this only impact the white working class, Melanie, rather than all white people?
No, it does. But we're talking about white working class children who get this at them in education.
Look, the other part of the story here, which you alluded to, is of course that the non-white working class, they're not really the social or cultural equivalents of the white working class. They'll often be immigrants. They have families who are on a trajectory, and they simply happen to be at a socioeconomic level with the kind of with the white working class as they are moving in another direction. Presumably, once those immigrant families are completely integrated, some generations down the line, their kids will do just as badly when they are at that socioeconomic level.
Well, no, they don't, because I think that they continue to understand the value of education. I think this is kind of imprinted in their cultural upbringing, imprinted in them through their cultural upbringing.
Sure.
And it's not in Britain, in the indigenous white population of Britain. Unfortunately, there's also, historically, and it's been part of Britain's strength, that there has been a robust scepticism, even derision, directed at people who are in the world of ideas, at intellectuals.
Yeah, sure.
And that's protected Britain in the past from tyrannies imposed by the world of ideas, such as the French Revolution onwards.
But this is the downside.
This is the downside.
I'm sorry to cut you short, but there's one more story I definitely want to talk to you about. This is a story that's going to cause a lot of anger. The ringleader of the Rochdale grooming gang is due to be released from prison this week, and his victims have been told that the 73-year-old Shabir Ahmed can't be deported to Pakistan. He did have dual British-Pakistani citizenship. The British citizenship was revoked after his conviction in 2012, but documents published online show he can't be removed to Pakistan because he lived in the UK for 5 years before his deportation was even considered. The Shadow Home Secretary Chris Phillips spoke to Kate McCann and Stay Gable on Times Radio Breakfast about this.
As far as I'm concerned, every foreign criminal should be deported, including and especially this despicable man who raped young girls. I mean, the worst imaginable crimes. He should be kicked out of this country, sent back to Pakistan, and it seems clear to me the law needs to be changed to get rid of this loophole that dates back over 50 years. This loophole needs to be removed. I urge the government to immediately change the law.
Melanie, I think virtually everyone will agree that this is a travesty, but the question is what to do about it.
Well, it comes back to the fact that people in government do not want to face up to, which is that you can't change the law because the law is bound by international human rights law. This is what Britain is signed up to. It affects Britain's ability to deport and to deal properly with foreign-based or foreign nationals in Britain, and has been for years and years and years. In my view, and it's always been my view, the only way through this is to resile from those laws. Now, successive governments have been very, very unwilling to do that, and it is a complicated business. It's not without problems. But you can't solve this problem if you want to throw out people that you believe are a danger to your country. It is intolerable that you can't do so. And virtually everybody thinks that.
Understood and agreed. However, even if we manage to change the law, where does he go?
He goes back to Pakistan.
What if they won't take him? I mean, you can't do this thing without the cooperation of the country you're sending somebody to.
Well, then you have to make them cooperate. And there are many things that we can do for Pakistan and against Pakistan, I'm sure, that would actually concentrate their minds rather wonderfully. At the moment, we have no weapons in our locker, and they know it. But countries to which this country wants to deport people need to be persuaded that it is in their interest to do so, and there are various mechanisms by which that can happen.
Finally, Melanie, and this is the most important story of the day, in 10 seconds or so, should people be allowed a small bit of joy and allowed to take off the last hour or two of work today in order to get to the pub to watch the England match later? Absolutely
not. I really disapprove of pubs, and I have no interest in football whatsoever, so it's absolutely intolerable.
Melanie Phillips there, as ever, bringing the joy. Thank you very much indeed, Melanie. Great to have you here.